record on the computer. So I'm just recording now. I don't know if usually it gives oh, maybe because I have to set it up ahead of time. The whole, the note, this thing will be recorded and all of that piece. So
yes.
yeah. Yeah. Okay. So we're recording. Yeah. So that always, so it'll be, I always find it cringy watching myself back, but I'll
Yes,
likely,
me too.
yeah, but I think just to be helpful for you if because there's probably a lot of information, or if you want to rewatch it
Yes,
to make sure,
that
to
would be
make it
great.
easier.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, no problem. And so I will likely be referring, I have a bunch of notes that I've made. I have a lot on the top of my head, but I also want to make sure I'm doing justice to the topic and for you and serving you right appropriately. So I will likely be referring just to the screen from time to time, whether it's my notes or I've got a deck. So sometimes it just kind of inspires the visual, just kind of inspires and helps to keep me, I would say, structured and on track, because I could ramble on forever, as you could probably see, which is great, which is why I'm glad you're taking what I say and synthesizing it and pulling out
Yes,
the key
exactly.
messages. So awesome. So so I guess the first question that so it actually was a term that was coined in the 70s by, there were two,
Oh,
I know I didn't actually know, I just thought it was just kind of this catchy phrase that people are starting to talk a lot more about, but it's been around since the 70s. So it was two faculty members, female faculty members that did a research study of, I think, over 100 plus. They said overachieving women. I laugh at the time in the 70s. What's an overachieving female? I think an achieving, individual. And so they did a study. And then from the outcome of the study, essentially, just that they coined that there's this concept or this thought of where people, feel that they're basically being a fraud, and or so the actual definition, if I can read it, I think, which actually does it justice. It's a psychological phenomenon which people are unable to internalize their own, I would say, accomplishments and successes, despite external evidence to the contrary, and that they feel like they're frauds and that they don't deserve the success that they've achieved. They don't internalize it. They don't accept it. They often, and so often how it may sound and what it might look like, that it may have the voice or the sound in the voice like everyone else has got their shit together. Who am I to be in the room here? Oh my gosh, I'm going to get found out. I'm going to get found out. I don't know how much longer I can keep this going. Basically, it's because I am female, or because I am the youngest, or because I came from an international, or because I came from a social science background, not a business background. I don't feel like I have the qualifications or the expertise to be able to X. So that's a little bit about, I'd say, what imposter syndrome is and what it actually sounds like, because I think a lot of times it starts with the rumblings in your head. Anyway, I'll shut up because I kind of rambled on for a little bit.
yeah, exactly. And I'm thinking, as you're saying that, where do people think imposter syndrome comes from? Does it come from the society in which we're brought up? Is it
Right.
more kind of an internal thing? Where does it come from?
Right. And so I'm going to pin that question for a bit. It's a great question. And I do an exercise in my workshop, and I'd love to have you come to one, just as an aside, even if it doesn't, because it's not till another few weeks, but I'd love to invite you
Okay.
to join in, if you feel free to join in. But so
I would
I go
love
through,
to.
yeah, I do. I absolutely go through it. So I will talk about that. One thing I want to say just before, very quickly, is that one thing I really think is important to normalize is that it happens to most people. And I think that's an important understanding, because I think when you know that you're not alone and you're not just a freak and thinking that you're the one that feels like a fraud, or at very least, if you don't have full on what's called imposter syndrome, I would say 99.99% of the people feel that, an insecurity, self-doubt, and lacking confidence at some point in their life and in their career. And so I think knowing you're not alone, I think also helps you to go, okay, gives you a little bit more grace to yourself and helps you be kinder to yourself, but also I think gives help you give grace and a lot more empathy to others. Because you're like, if I'm not alone and if I'm feeling like a fraud in this meeting, maybe you can actually get to a point where, you know what, Cara, she might even feel this way. And you know what, I'm going to work with her to help bring out her best in her. And so the whole goal and the reason I am so passionate about this topic is I have this mission to be able to elevate the conversation, around, confidence and imposter syndrome in, I would say, the corporate world, because I don't think we talk about it nearly enough. And again, it doesn't have to be the whole on imposter syndrome but the fact that everybody is coming in with their own insecurities, and they have a bag that they're bringing into the world, whatever that might be. So I just wanted to kind of normalize that first, because I think that's the first piece. So typically when I do either a talk or my session, I start with like the what, defining it. And then I get into the why. And so I think but the what is just, like I said, grounding and normalizing it a bit. But the part of the what is that you're not alone. And in fact, you're in good company. Jennifer Lopez, Howard Schultz. So he's the CEO, founder of Starbucks. He's admitted it. Tom Hanks has admitted it. Meryl Streep is famously, Maya Angelou. So there's so many well-known people out in the world that have actually spoke very openly about this as well.
Right. And yeah, if you can look at them and say, wow, they've achieved so much, and how could they think that, then it's a little bit easier to be, easier on ourselves and give ourselves grace of,
exactly,
someone who's done so much still has these feelings.
Yeah, exactly. And who it tends to hit the most, ironically, are the overachievers, so to speak. And so my favorite people in the world to work with are the insecure overachievers, that they know that they're, well, I know when I'm working with them, I know there's a ton of potential, but they just don't really, they don't acknowledge it themselves and own it and accept it.
Right.
Because often what it comes down to, so I'm just rambling and hopefully you can kind of pull some pieces, and so maybe this is kind of under the why, one of the reasons, and I have, maybe I'll share the screen with you just so that you, if it's okay with you, I'll share just because it has a little visual that kind of, I think it's just kind of a sort of pseudo fun. Sorry, just give me a second here. Do from current slide. There, you can see that okay? So this is, so exactly, I think it's a great question, because it's like, why does this happen then? And so I believe any change, any powerful change, starts with understanding, kind of the root of the problem and where things come from. And so one of the surprising aha moments I'd had as I started to really go down this, self-development path, so to speak, in personal development, professional development, was that, I always made the assumption that is, I'm going to call it like God's creatures, whatever God or no God you believe in, but as creatures that we're just magical human beings, we're on this planet, and how the heck did we get here? Like, so that I just kind of assumed that we were just kind of born for greatness. Everybody's and I still think that, but funny enough, as I did a lot more research on this topic, we are more designed to survive than thrive. We are, our natural default setting is all harnessed on survival and procreation are the two big things, like ensuring that our species, has some longevity and sustainability in the longer term. And so what does that mean? In the prehistoric days, we it was this basically more of a binary fight or flight type of dynamic, and the hunters and the gatherers. So that is something, even though today, we have so many more resources, so much more opportunity, but we still default to our primal brain, essentially, like our reptilian brain is kind of how I refer to it. And it is a little bit more.
I've read that, most of the time we're operating with our like primal brain, like we have to consciously use our frontal lobes.
Exactly. And we do. But you can change. That is the good news. And that's kind of on the what's next sort of thing, the how piece. that there is neuroplasticity and we can, change our behavior and our reaction, but we can't change until we at least acknowledge that we have a little bit of our odds stacked against us. Often I say it's kind of like pushing water uphill in terms of trying to be these happy and fulfilled creatures. We can be happy and fulfilled. Absolutely. I wouldn't be doing this if we couldn't be. But it does start with our understanding that, at the very core, we're designed to survive and not thrive. And so what does that look like? Sometimes, again, it's these thoughts in our head. They're all based on protecting us, self-preservation and protecting. So related to survival. And so that's where I've got the ducky and the duck that stands out. If being ostracized from a community, especially, many, many years ago, I don't even know if we were on the planet a million years ago, but many, many years ago, being ostracized from our group meant we didn't survive. We needed a community to survive. And so that is something that is incredibly hardwired and it's in our DNA. And so putting ourselves out there, speaking up in a meeting, disagreeing with people, these types of things, or taking risks, just taking risks in general, whether it's professionally or, on a personal level, even on a relationship level, putting yourself out there for your partner, it isn't a natural default. And so those are two pieces that I think are incredibly important and kind of set the foundation for why we experience imposter syndrome, because it is all about self-preservation and survival.
Right.
It doesn't mean that, that we're going to be happy as well. Another reason that we may experience, and I do a poll at the very beginning of these workshops, and more often than not, people cite, sort of experiences growing up, whether it's family experiences and or high school experiences. But, we start off as belligerent toddlers, right? Or as babies that get loved unconditionally, and we can do nothing wrong, right? We poop, we cry, we get loved most of the time. And if we don't, then obviously that manifests in other ways longer term. But for the most part, we're unconditionally loved. And then, we start as toddlers, we become belligerent. We're not going to listen to anybody. We don't care what people think. We'll take a toy away from a kid or throw a toy at a kid, right? Or tell your mom to no, or you know what I mean? Or even like hit people because you just don't know. Like, but as we grow up and evolve, we have our social experiences, and whether we get full on bullied or whatever you want to call it, or made fun of, but you do everything to fit in with a clique potentially, and then through some high school experiences, we start to form our own beliefs of who we are. As a very concrete example, for me, I grew up in a great family. My dad was a principal, my mom was a nurse's aide, so on paper, four kids. They very much lots of love in the family and lots of laughs. I mean, not perfect. We all have our stories, but I was the youngest, and by nature of being the youngest, I came out of situations feeling like my worldview was never valued. And what does she know? She's just the youngest. And that, I think that just kind of manifested. And then, whether or not you had some early childhood experiences, going through high school, I was known as being very insecure and just trying to kind of fit the mold so that I didn't stand out in any way. And I think many people can relate to that. I actually viewed, I think I compared myself to others. So I compare myself to this one, you don't have to put the name in, but Manu Panois was the individual. And he basically had a 99.9 average coming out of school, or a 99 average, like ridiculously intelligent, like highly intelligent. He's now, I think like a neuroscientist, like he's doing some great stuff, but I would benchmark myself against somebody like that academically. Whereas, I held two jobs. I paid for my own university when I went through university. I was always active, extracurricular, and I had a very strong social. Like I like to go out with my friends Thursday, Friday, Saturday, all the time. And I would talk on the phone with friends all the time. So I was very outgoing and social. But so understanding that you're at a different point starting, like you're in a different game and a different platform than other people. So I think that the big thing is like your childhood experiences, I think, are a big contributing factor as well. So it's stacking, right? Like all these things just stack year over year and year over year, and as you kind of form who you are and they shape your thoughts, shape your beliefs about who you are, and your beliefs shape your thoughts. It's kind of a symbiotic relationship. And then it shapes your, what you say, and then what you do, your actions as well, and their emotion and how you feel. And it's all symbiotic,
Mhm.
like they all interact as well. So I don't think it's a linear
Right.
relationship. I think a lot of models talk about it being linear, but I think it's very much all interconnected in all relations. So, and then, okay, so I've been talking a lot. Do you have any questions, or do you want me just to go on to the social media and the Disney picture?
Yeah, that'd be great. It was something I was thinking about when you were talking about that. I can't remember now where I read it, but I read something about, we're all created unique, right? We're all our own unique person, and then we're
Yeah.
all trying to be exactly the same. It's like if there's a product that's like one of a kind, it's the only thing like it, it's very valuable. People really want it. And so it's
Yeah.
like, why are we trying to be, all the same when we have such uniqueness to bring. So
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Often, and I think that does go back to the being ostracized from the group. You want to just try and conform and fit in and not be somebody that other people talk about in some
yeah.
ways. And again, that goes right down to just our DNA and our core, in terms of the importance of having a social, like that we are social beings and the importance of that. But I love that, where, we do. So I'm processing that, where we go through, yeah, like going through life, like trying to fit in, versus really what we should
Hmm.
be doing is trying to I don't know what the opposite of like what's a good word for
Well, or
the opposite.
embrace our uniqueness.
Exactly. And what makes us distinct and shine, right? Like show our
Hmm.
superpowers and shine. And I'll touch a little bit on that in the how piece of it, but um I always found it fascinating that, and again, this is another aha, like sort of going through this coaching journey that I've been in the last few years, that it started with me. They call it me search, right? Like, and then I take it to my coaching. But what comes easy to people, like, is often what ends up being their superpower, right? Something that is
Hmm.
incredibly superpower. So for me, I think I'm very practical. I think I'm practical, common sense, and some things are just sort of feels like it's in front of my face and it's so easy. Or connecting with people and making people feel at ease. I've been told that that's a strength, and I'm like, well, it doesn't everybody do that? Isn't everybody wired that way? And not everybody is. And so whatever comes easy to you, you take it for granted because it just flows. And so that, I think,
Right.
plays into your, everybody has this special gift, but we don't acknowledge it because it just comes easy for us, and it
Hmm.
becomes easy to us. um yeah, great point, great point. So all of these things, and then you know what, guess what, we we also stack in and layer in social media. So this is, something that I think exponentially amplifies our own insecurities and our own, uh, deep insecurities, our jealousies, it can bring out some of the worst in us, because
Hmm.
most people will post only their highlights. Like if,
Right.
they don't host the low light or post the low lights of, or even not even just low lights, but the behind the scenes. So I may post a great picture of my son getting accepted into university. I did that. But did I post all the, times where I'm yelling at him to do his homework, or where he's sitting there doing homework, or some of the tests that he's failed to kind of get him, before to kind of get him like motivated, or you know what I mean? Like, so those, but people just post sort of the the highlights, and don't post kind of the reality of what, it's like an 80-20. It's probably 20% at most that people have the highlights. 80%
Right.
like it's a struggle, and people, there's more complexity behind things. So, and then this is one I've been thinking about. I have not read, I don't have any direct research on this piece of it, but this one is interesting to me. I call it the Disney effect. So basically, and I think you can probably even kind of just by the nature of the Disney effect, that it's always about the happy ending. So I think
Hmm.
this is where we set false expectations in life. And some of those false expectations are, the happily ever after, and finding that perfect. It always is the word, he's perfect for me. He's my prince and my Prince Charming. Or, and then also on the flip side, you've got this beautiful princess who's dressed perfectly and wakes up with makeup on and looks perfect and, never has smelly breath when they're waking up in these on these rom-coms and
Right.
right, they're just all like looking beautiful and perfect. And of course there's a story and a journey to get there. But this happily ever after. And it's I think programmed us to celebrate the result in the end, or realize that that there's a destination in mind. And in fact, it's actually more about the progress, the journey, the milestones along the way, that we really need to take a point in time and acknowledge and celebrate those. And then on the flip side, having this false impossible expectation of perfection, right, has been set. And this isn't just for females, this is for guys. Actually, in some ways, I don't want to say worse or not, imposter syndrome impacts women. And I think initially the research suggests it was for women, but I think more and more research is coming out that it impacts men just as much. It just manifests differently. And for them, they have this, they have to live up to this, such high standard of Prince Charming. And who could do that, right?
Right.
At all times. And a guy maybe misses a date, like a birthday, or doesn't give the rose or whatever, you know what I mean? Like that. And then so they're not necessarily, or they're not as romantic and don't know how to communicate and say the things that people hear in the rom-coms. And I'm using the
Right.
relationship one, but I don't think you can unbundle a person's relationships with the other individuals and experiences. And these are, constant movies that we've been brought up with. I love The Little Mermaid and Cinderella stories as much as, the next person, but I do think it's programmed us to set false expectations that nobody can live up to.
Right.
Sorry, that's a big mouthful.
No, but I mean, it's all very interesting, all the different aspects that come into it, that it's not just a simple, oh, this is the cause, and so the solution is just
Yeah.
do this. So
Yeah. It's complex and it's scaffolds, I think, is the big thing, that they stack on each other. And it's not a linear, none of it's a linear relationship at all.
Right.
So, and it's not cookie cutter. I think that's the big highlight that I try to reinforce. This is not cookie cutter or one size fits all for individuals. The weighting may be more on the primal brain for some individuals, or for some, they're just not wired where they don't, like a lot of people I know, and they don't, or they project that they don't care as much what people think of them. So,
Right.
and so it really just depends on the individuals, but I have distilled it down to these 5. I'm sure there's many more reasons, but can't talk about this forever. I have to have some bumpers on this.
Right. So then you were talking about working in, kind of the corporate world in terms of imposter syndrome, but I wonder, and especially since a lot of our audience is colleges and universities, is there anything that can be done at that level to kind of, number one, maybe recognize in students imposter syndrome, and then give them tools to combat that, or ways to kind of mitigate it in college before they get to career?
Yeah. I think this is the best time. Their brains are still much more malleable. Every year that passes, we become a little bit more our behaviors become a little bit more hardwired and a little bit more challenging to unwind, so to speak. So as I'd mentioned, there is this thing called neuroplasticity. So we can absolutely change. And if you can hit individuals sort of at the precipice of them launching out into their careers, I think, wow, how they could light the world on fire and probably create kinder and more constructive and more positive working cultures as well. So absolutely. And maybe, a bit of a background. I know you have I think you'll probably have my bio or whatnot, but one thing that I like to highlight is that I've had, being 13 years at Ivy Business School, I'm really proud that I have coached over 1,000 students. I've easily logged in my 10,000 plus hours of coaching, which, according to Malcolm Gladwell, makes you an expert in an area. And what always amazed me, and so for those that are not aware, like Ivy Business School is one of the top business schools globally. It definitely is a top school in Canada. It's a smaller program. We tend to bring in, some very high caliber individuals across the world. And so the assumption would be that these individuals have it figured out. And similar on our HBA students, they're parallel and they compete for the same roles as Wharton, people like in Wharton, and they're quite heavily sought after by the market. And we have an MSc program too, which again, so I don't want to just be Sarah, but I suggest that one program has higher caliber than not. All Ivy students have come in and they have such wonderful, great experience. My experience has primarily been with the MBA students. And so I can kind of speak very intimately about them. This is where I think the light bulb went off for me when I was coaching them, and realizing that despite, again, going back to the definition of imposter syndrome, despite them having, incredible, academic accomplishments, even accomplishments career-wise or in their community or even outside, like there are individuals that had created their own startups or had gone to Haiti and created these solar panels or installed solar panels and volunteered and, just did these ridiculous, crazy things. But despite that, there would be signals that in my coaching of insecurity, self-doubt. It would be like the fear of failure, and full on for many, the full on imposter syndrome. And I think as the program progressed, part of the journey, it exasperated it for many, because they started to get into this comparison game and look at other people and go, holy cow, right? Like, look at this individual. They got it all figured out. I don't have it all. They know what they want to do. They're doing great, and then that person I would coach who I knew that they were probably speaking about, and they were like, I don't know what I want to do, blah, blah, I feel like I'm shitting the bed. I'm all over the place, so I guess that I say that, and I will get to the answer to the question, but I think that's some good background to highlight that's really where this I thought, okay, if people really understood kind of where it comes from, like why they have it, and normalize it, that it's not just them that has this, then I think they're going to be in a place where they can actually change and adopt some tools. So here's my next slide. So I've got some tools and techniques to master the imposter syndrome. Again, because it's not one size fits all, there are so many different ways. And I could make this a list of 20 things. And again, it's fairly complex. It's not cookie cutter. So I have distilled it down to 7. And so I talked a little bit about things, but I would say, some tools and strategies to help manage. So I think I gave some indicators for people to watch, like sound bites for people to watch for in their coaching. Students, I guess for coaches to triage. If that's kind of what a student's experience, I think you can almost go in and assume that that's probably at the core, but until you get the student to actually maybe externalize it or verbalize it a little bit, then you can actually start to address it and have a conversation and unpack it with the individual. But sometimes individuals would say, well, I don't think I don't think I've got what it takes to be a consultant. I really want to, but I don't have the marks. Or I don't want to put my eggs in one basket would be a big one. I really don't want to focus because again, the fear of failure and putting themselves out there, and then or comparison to other students would be a big thing. Or they would start a sentence because I come from I gave some sound bites earlier, an international student, or because I, come from more of an arts background, or because I have less experience than other individuals. And sometimes, sorry, I'm kind of rambling, so I hopefully can kind of pull this. And I'm sorry, I love talking about this topic, but one thing I think that's important to highlight is that sometimes the imposter syndrome or these voices in your head can actually be a good thing, right? Like, I don't want to suggest that it's always a bad thing and always a negative thing. I think for the most part, it can manifest in negative ways, but it also can be a good check and balance. So as an example, if you have a 500 GMAT and you have 2 years of experience and it's not necessarily progressive experience and there's not a lot of depth and complexity yet, you likely may not make it into what we call the MBB, McKinsey, Bain, BCG firms, or some of the Credit Suisse, or some of these high profile, like that is a reality check. So if they have this thought, well, I don't have enough experience, yet, or my GMAT, it's probably a valid. So sometimes there are valid thoughts. And so I do want to kind of make a point that sometimes, in the professional world, when people, or even in the classroom, when they're about to raise their hand and make a contribution, they're like, well, was that the generic comment that everybody's going to say? And I think it's just a good question. And then it can be true. It might not be true, but I think it's at least it's a checkpoint for you to assess. And that's okay. And I think that helps to be the fuel to ensure that people are, achieving and being successful and progressing.
Right.
Okay. Sorry, I went off on a tangent. I can come back.
Well, and I know that just, speaking from personal experience, it's not even just an answer to, kind of, like if you're in a college or university setting, right? And a professor or someone in the career services office, kind of praises you and gives you kind of that self-confidence boost, but just the words aren't enough. Like, you have to believe it. Like, I know when people have said really nice things about me in the past, I don't necessarily let it sink in. I'm just like, oh, that's really nice that they think that about me. So, I don't know, how can people be more open to receiving and believing that about themselves when people, they're not just complimenting you to be nice, they actually think highly of you.
Yeah, I think that's such a great question. And I think us as coaches, and I do this all the time, I want to build somebody's confidence up, and I want to share how I see them through my eyes, and hope that they can kind of start to internalize. And I do think those pieces people hear and they stack. Unfortunately, our brain is wired, again, going back to the negativity, to focus on the negative. So it'll take saying something like that 10 times, probably from 10 different people in 10 different ways, in 10 different channels, to offset that one time or that one comment that might have been made, or, experience that they had that kind of knocked their confidence. And so you think of that ratio, like we're constantly digging ourselves out. And so I think as a coach, understanding that, I think is helpful. It's not that you want to sit there and just sugarcoat it and constantly give praise to an individual. But I think understanding that, the why it doesn't always sink in is incredibly helpful as a starting point. And, and you're right. Like, I think a lot of it has to come from within. And so, I think for me, the big place, I think there's two things that people, when they ask, where do I start? How can I start? Because you can see there's a big list of 7, and underneath all these 7, there's a lot of tactical things you could do. And I'm happy to kind of give 1 or 2 very quick hits on each of these that you could kind of touch upon, or some quick speaking points. But the 2 places that I would start is, the first place for anywhere I would start is moving your body. I believe that there's just a whole wealth of research and science behind the importance of moving your body. I mean, Tony Robbins was the king and the inventor, so to speak, of or known to be like the silly guy jumping and going out of control and jumping and moving your body. He was onto something. He knew it instinctively, and it worked with his clients. Although he hadn't, I don't think, had it based on any direct I guess, of his own research. But since then, Amy Cuddy has come out, Harvard professor, with the power of presence and the importance of the mind-body connection and moving your body. And so that is a rich and deep topic, but it does start with this mind-body connection. And so there's a new term called neurobics. Mel Robbins talks about that in her book. She's got a new book called like The High Five Habit. And again, just so much research behind the power of moving your body, even from coming to a place, if you're somebody who exercises in the morning, and it doesn't necessarily have to be every day, although I think you should move your body in some capacity every day. I think that is, like, I think it sets the tone. I know it sets the tone for the day. But, even from a mindset and a belief, you start to form these beliefs that I'm somebody who works out. Oh, I don't know if can you hear me still? I feel like I can see myself frozen.
Yeah, I can still hear you. Your video was frozen, but I could still hear you. So
okay, sorry. I know I can see the goofiest face of mine. I'm stopping the video here.
Okay.
Just for a second. Oh, sorry. And I have a booster and everything in here. All right.
Yeah,
Well, I'll keep.
that's one thing about living in Chattanooga. We have, like the gig, the fiber,
Oh,
whatever, the
nice.
really high speed internet.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, I'm trying to stop my video. Oh, now I'm there. Okay. 'Cause sometimes I think that just helps. Okay, I'm putting my video back on. But the I'll just talk while I'm doing this, but the neurobics, so that's a concept not coined by Mel Robbins, but I heard her speak about it. And just the concept between the mind body is so important. And then I think we all know that, when you move your body, like I don't think it's any shock to anybody. It releases this, wonderful cocktail of hormones and all these great hormones that come rushing through your body, like the dopamine and all the good cocktails, so and I mean, obviously just you're healthier, you feel better, you have more, and it helps to bring more energy, all of those things. So I mean, I won't go too deeply on, well, I kind of did go, I guess, pretty deeply, but that's what I would say is kind of the very first space. And so in terms of coaching, I mean, it's not necessarily about, especially if they're a career coach, it doesn't feel like it's related to them. But I think even just asking the question, like, what are your morning habits? Like, do you integrate, moving your body or any exercise into your daily? Because I believe there are some, what I call like a small hinge basically can move a big door. And there's small things you can do that make a big difference in your life. Like they say, like drinking lots of water, like extra water, putting a lemon in your water, huge difference. Taking 5 minutes to do some deep breathing exercises in the morning. These are all these little things, but they start to stack on the positive and help to kind of counter, um, all the insecurities and kind of help you get into a positive and a growth mindset as well. So that would be the one. And then the second piece where I would start is controlling these thoughts in your head. So these thoughts, they say we've got 60 to 90,000 thoughts that run through our head on a daily basis, which is just crazy to think. Most of them we're not even aware of. It's on a subconscious level. And they say 90, I think 5% plus, depends who I've heard vary, but between 90 and 95% of those thoughts are repeat thoughts as well. So, if you're thinking you're having 90,000, let's just say 100,000, like you're having 90,000 or 80,000 thoughts, negative thoughts in a daily basis, possibly, because if they're repeating and it's a loop that you're in,
right.
that is going to shape how you approach and think and your perspective, that you go into your day and into every situation.
And it can be hard to control your thoughts because thoughts come unbidden.
Yeah.
It's not like you're wanting to think about that.
It's absolutely subconscious. So it's easy just to say, oh, control your thoughts. But so I do have a 5R model that I run through with that I've created and I run through with individuals. And I'm happy if you want to write about it and bring it in. It's something I'm happy to share. I have not yet copyrighted it, just to let you know. I probably should, I guess, just in case. I mean, I don't think again, I try in my sort of approach to just be very practical, make things really easy and tangible and tactical versus overcomplicating things. So if I could, I would even have a 3R model to make it even simpler, because I know there's ones that are out there, but the 5R I think is, so basically it's recognize. So, and these are muscles. I would just say these are muscles in your body, your head, your mind that you need to stretch. So the first is recognize. So when you have a thought, trying to find a way to trigger, go, oh, wow, okay, that's not right, or, oh, there's that thought again, here she is, I'm speaking to Cara and I'm like, oh gosh, who am I to speak about imposter syndrome? This is, I'm going to ramble on and blah, blah, blah. And I am rambling on, but it's getting yourself to a place where you recognize that there's a thought. So, taking a step back, people, obviously do mindfulness and meditation, deep breathing as a way to help build up what they say, sort of like the trenches in the brain, to try and get better at recognizing these thoughts. But that's where it starts. It's a recognizing, and often it's a trigger. It might be an emotion that triggers you, might be a situation that you're triggered. For me, when there's something new, if I have a new client that's asking for something, my first reaction is, I can't do that, I'm not qualified. And then I have to pause and go, whoa, 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 whoa. And so that's the next piece, is the refute. If it's not true. I mean, there's an assessment that's part of the recognizing process. You want to assess, but I'm going to tell you that 99% of those thoughts are likely complete bullshit lies.
Mhm.
So, and then so then it's a refute, and then it's like, okay, no, no. And so having a kind of a go-to phrase or a go-to word or something just to trigger it and go, or it might just be, I don't know about that. Let me think about it. Like just something to refute. I don't think that's the case. But just something to kind of pause. So recognize, refute. And this is the next one where I think it really grounds it is ridicule. And so
Mhm.
so some people call, naming it or having an avatar, that voice that's saying things. So mine is Nellie. So I was a big fan of Little House on the Prairie, the little braided, I
Mhm.
don't know if I'm dating myself, but she was like a little bully,
Yeah,
and she was
I've
not a
definitely seen Little House on the Prairie, know
yeah.
exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. So Nellie was mine. And so Nasty Nellie. So and or some people put a voice to it and ridicule, basically um like we'll just kind of put a weird voice, and then that, I think by doing that, it also again builds up these neurotransmitters in your brain. Again, I'm not a neurologist, but it helps to build up the brain muscle, so to speak, and helps you to trigger, because all of a sudden when that voice comes in, you just default and hear it in this really weird kind of strange voice, and then it's like, how can I take that? I can't take that voice or that thought seriously at all. Like, really, you idiot. um and then other people, other thoughts are just, it's not really under the ridicule, but it does help to ground. It's like, would you really speak to would you speak to your best friend that way? Would you speak to your worst
Mm,
enemy that way? Is another thing to kind of a go-to phrase. Like, wow, you're pretty nasty, you wouldn't speak to so and so that way. um,
right.
and then so then the next is, then you need to replace, you need a go-to mantra, or um, I think it's helpful to have a go-to mantra, because these happen so quickly that it's important to be able to kind of counter it right in the moment, and because it's very dynamic. So um some people, like Mindy Kaling as an example, she's like, I'm fucking Mindy Kaling, like, she just tries to kind of, like, she has a go-to, or I got this is kind of mine, I got this, I can do this. Yeah. And then repeat is the final. So is because again, it all for nothing if you just, it's a one and done. So anytime you have this, try and consciously think of the 5R. It starts just recognize and having some sort of trigger.
Yeah. Oh, that's yeah, and it's so good, especially for someone like me. I don't know. I'm very kind of like, I want steps. Like I want actual practical things that I
Yeah,
can do um to combat a problem. So that's great.
yeah, yeah.
Um Yeah, so I think so we've gone through the what it is, the why, and then the how to kind of combat it. Is there anything else you usually talk about or would want to have in this?
I'm I'm trying to think. Like, I think if anything, it's just sort of a summary statement that the things that I think, I mean, I could go on, I'm looking at the screen, and there could be a couple um other tactical things that you know people could do, or to coach on in terms of these topics, but it's complex, like I would say. So I think the high thing is, high level thing, it's complex, it is not cookie cutter and one size fits all, in terms of why people experience it, um who experiences it, and when, even it's season. So the other comment is, it can be seasonal as well, and be amplified in different contexts. So as an example, if you're working for an awful boss, let's just say it, like most people in their point in time have worked for a boss that has not been the most positive constructive experience.
Mm-hmm.
And that might be a context or situation that's definitely not bringing the best, and only helping to shed more light on their insecurities, versus on the opposite, when you work for somebody really positive, and a great manager. So I do think it's seasonal. So I want to highlight that it's complex, it's not one size fits all. Um, and it can be, it can rear its ugly head at different points in people's life, and different season. It can be seasonal as well. But the good thing is, I think, is the other piece. not the good, before I go to the good thing. And then the other thing I like to highlight is, like, again, for summary points, because typically at the end I'll do a quick summary. You're not alone. I think the studies in the 70s suggested that 70%, or sorry, it was in the 90s, that 70% of people have experienced imposter syndrome. I think the other 30% are either full out lying or don't really know. But I would say the vast majority, and I think most people reading this article will appreciate that they experience. So I think there's power in knowing you're not alone, and that we're wired to survive, not thrive, right? So we need to take proactive effort, in terms of living a fulfilling and meaningful life, and making sure we're staying ahead of the imposter syndrome. And so the good news is then we have neuroplasticity, we can change. And there are a lot of tools out there, and again, under the category of not one size fits all. And I don't recommend for individuals to try, in terms of the how and how to operate. I say pick, one or two things to start. Just start, today, right away. Very concrete thing. Make your bed in the morning might be a very specific and concrete thing. A lot of research suggests, right? Again, tying to identity. You're a person that makes your bed and you're organized. And I actually care about, what my future self will like. Because when my future self walks in the room and I see my bed made nicely, like, you get a little endorphin rush. So I care about myself. Like, there's just a lot of psychology behind making your bed. Super easy, takes 5 minutes. Well, depending on how many pillows and what kind of bed you have, and how big the bed is, but takes 5 minutes at most in the morning. Such a small little thing. And that's under the category of control what you can control. Cleaning out a closet, I think the same thing. I think there's the spark. What is it? I forget the book. It's kind of, what Marie Kondo.
Sparking Joy.
Sparking Joy. So she gets into that, but the Marie Kondo, cleaning a closet. So that's under the control what you can control. So there are things. Start with moving your body, whatever that looks like, even if it's dancing for 5-10 minutes in the morning. Take 5-10 minutes to do deep breathing in the morning. So these are some small things that you can do, and then bigger things, possibly picking one small thing and then one bigger thing in tandem. So working with yourself to seek out, kind of your why and your passion. I think, because if you feel like your passion, or you are working in an area, I don't like to overuse the word passion, but if you're working in an area that you're feeling like you have purpose and meaning, then, and you're contributing and making impact, you're naturally going to feel great, obviously, right? And it's actually going to help build out your own confidence. So anyway,
Right.
Sorry, that was a long ramble, but I tried to kind of summarize a lot of what I rambled. It's a good thing I booked the hour.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of passion, I saw that you had liked a post about Ikigai, or however you pronounce it. Like the Japanese way of living.
Yes.
And I read that book actually a
cool.
few years ago and loved it. Like it offers such great, like you were saying, little things that you can do in your life to live a little bit more mindfully and a little bit better. And yeah, I think it's so important.
I think so too. I have not read it. So that it's great that you see that. So this gentleman, and I'm actually in touch with him, David McLean, he posts fantastic stuff on LinkedIn. So I'm constantly like consuming his content. And sometimes he has great visuals. So some of them might find its way in some of my content and presentations I'm sure he's like, I know he'd be happy, actually very happy about that. But yeah, so that might be a book I'm looking to make my next sort of set of book orders. So that's another thing, right? Like I spend 20 minutes every morning at minimum reading every day, and just try to, like, as if you read, or was it James Clear? He says, if you read 10 pages a day or 20 pages a day, that's, X amount of books a year. Like, it's all these small little habits that you get into. And that's the next topic that I'm looking to delve into, because I think, to your point, it's all well and good to know and have the theory of something and go walk away from reading an article or a workshop or a coaching session knowing, that you should do something, but it's like, okay, but now how do you actually incorporate and integrate that into your life on a daily, weekly, monthly basis? So
Right. Well, and I know I have, obviously read about, how important mornings are and starting your day off right. But for us who are not morning people, do you have any suggestions for non-morning people?
I'm in the non-morning people club. I'm lucky I have my own business, so I tend to not book meetings before X hour so that I can dedicate my time, and I tend to go work a little later. I don't really take a full on lunch. So I think most people don't anyway anymore. So if you have the ability to organize your schedule where you don't necessarily have a meeting and you can start a little later and work later and have that flexibility, that would be one thing. I'm not a 5 a.m. I know the Robin Sharma's got the 5 a.m. club. He did get me started on the more importance of morning habits. And to my chagrin, there's so much research that suggests that people that get up at 5 a.m. are these, tend to be, the more successful individuals, but they're not limited to that. The other thing is you can do yourself some favors by, the night before, setting
Mm-hmm.
yourself up at night. So they say, one of the habits is like throwing your workout clothes right on the floor right in the morning, because you're going to step right on them and it's going to bother you. You're going to have to pick them up, and you have to pick them up. You might as well put them on.
Right.
So those types of triggers as well. Mel Robbins talks a lot about the 5-second rule. I don't know if you've ever heard
I
of that.
I have, yes.
Yeah. So she's about not snoozing, and the way that she does it is the 5-4 counting backwards. And when you count backwards, it ignites a certain part of your brain, the frontal lobe or whatever that actually is a higher thinking, basically is a higher thinking part of your brain. So that might be another approach is, just when you're getting up and making sure, like committing to yourself the night before, being intentional, and maybe even writing it down in a journal that I will not, I will get up at this time. Because for me, I could unpack this forever because there's another angle I want to go into, but once I'm up, I feel great. And I am, and then I'm like, oh, I'm actually like, my sweet spot would actually be waking up, I think at 5:45, probably. Like when I wake up at that time, if I could wake up that time naturally, I feel great once I'm up. But getting there is the biggest hurdle. And so two things, it's a muscle you have to stretch if you want to try and get
Mhm.
up a little earlier in the morning. The other thing, and this goes a little deeper, is that might be a limiting belief. You like saying I'm not a
Mm.
morning person, and you may have not always been a morning person, but that does, your history does not have to be your destiny, is kind of the other expression. So what
Oh, uh-huh.
you don't have to always define yourself as not a morning person. You can change that if you want to. And it doesn't mean you have to be at 5 a.m., but you could get up, a half hour earlier, or try, another tactical approach is trying to kind of pull up, getting like 15 minutes, each week, just kind of moving it back
Mhm.
15 minutes each week, and committing to it, right? Telling somebody, having an accountability partner,
Mhm.
and having, even if it's a text in the morning saying I'm up. I had an accountability partner to work out. We would, text and I'm up, I'm doing my workout, and anyway, I could ramble. That's a great, and I might have to do I might even have to do a little, I could do a little talk on that one, I think, given how much, because
Yeah.
I'm not a morning person either, but
There
again,
there are a lot of us, so
yeah, yeah, that's an interesting, I'm going to write that one down as just as a very, whether it's a video or a blog or, yeah, I like that.
yeah, I would read it or watch it, so.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, cool, cool. Any other questions? So I hope I wasn't too rambly, or this isn't too much.
No, yeah, this is great, and yeah, I'll go back through it and pull out pieces and put together my article, and I'll reach out to you if I come up with any questions as I'm putting it together, like if oh, could you expand on this or whatever. But yeah, this has been so great. Thank you so
Awesome.
much.
You're welcome. Will you need my bio or anything at all for it, or
Yeah, actually, that would be great. I don't know if the like one on your website or if you have a separate one you wanted to send me.
I'll send you a separate, the one on my website's probably good. I still like my website's what 90%. I still need to clean that. I'll send you one just so that,
Okay.
because I think it's a long one on the website. So I'll send you one that's a little bit more tighter.
All right. Yeah, that'd be great.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you. This has been fun. I always love talking about this topic, and I hope you gained some things out of it today for you personally as well.
Yes, definitely. And yeah, I would love to attend your
Yes,
next workshop.
I will send you the invite. I think it's on the 27th of October. So I'll send you the invite shortly.
All right. Thanks so much,
Okay. You're
Brenda.
welcome. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, you as well.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.